warm welcome here in our studio in Sarakunda. This is Star TV News with me, Maimuna Fadera. In the headlines tonight, impact of COVID-19 on lives and livelihood extremely destructive, says President Barrow. President Barrow appoints two justices of the Supreme Court of the Gambia. Health Ministry not losing sight of the deadly malaria disease in the upcoming rainy season. On the international scene, 1 year since crackdown government yet to deliver justice in Sudan. Through tears, mother of George Floyd's daughter demands justice. China withheld COVID-19 information according to AP investigation. Well, those were the headlines, and now the news in details. The Gambian President Adama Barrow says on Wednesday the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on human lives and livelihoods is extremely destructive. President Barrow was addressing the virtual extraordinary sessional summit of heads of states and government of the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States. Maria Madam files in this report.
The theme of the conference was promised on transcending the COVID-19 pandemic, building resilience through global solidarity. Barrow says it's therefore important to place the human being at the center of the deliberations.
The impact of the pandemic on human lives and livelihoods is extremely destructive. It has disrupted the momentum and gains made towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and other development targets.
Barrow stated that the Gambia has adopted measures to contain the spread of the virus, including declaring a state of public emergency, observing WHO's regulations, and mitigating the impact of such strict measures on the public.
The pandemic has impacted severely on both the formal and informal sectors of our economy.
He seeks more urgent attention to both sectors, noting that the informal sector contributes crucially towards sustaining livelihoods and the GDP. According to the President, the impact on employment, government revenue, and the substance of the people is immensely negative. The Gambian leader says the containment measures will have multiple effects in both urban and rural settings.
Economically, women and the youth are the most vulnerable groups, as their income-generating activities center heavily on the tourism, fisheries, and artisanal industries. It is imperative, therefore, that we seize this opportunity to call upon our development partners to collaborate with us to respond effectively to the economic challenges posed by COVID-19. With respect to SDG 11 on sustaining our settlements, this is particularly relevant for such vulnerable groups.
He challenged his colleagues to outline strategies and action points to minimize disruption to the food and agriculture systems, while adequately supporting the livelihoods of all vulnerable groups.
Sustaining agricultural production and strengthening food systems need to be intensified urgently for member states whose economies rest heavily on commodity export and food imports.
He further stressed that financing development should be central to discussions on building resilient economies and advancing social inclusion and development. Reporting for Star TV News, I am Maria Madem.
In a press release sent to Star TV, President Barrow appoints two justices of the Supreme Court of the Gambia. The release reads, His Excellency President Adama Barrow, in accordance with the power vested on him under Section 138(2) of the 1997 Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia, has appointed Honorable Justice Awaba and Honorable Justice Idrissa F. Mbai as Justice of the Supreme Court of the Gambia. The appointments will be effective on 1st August 2020. Following the recommendations of the Judicial Service Commission, the appointments of the 2 judges will bring the number of full-time Gambian judges to 7, with less dependency on part-time judges. It will also provide the Supreme Court with the number required to hear and determine a case of review. These latest appointments are central in increasing the number of Gambian legal luminaries in the judiciary, an important factor in the judicial reforms under the Barrow administration. Meanwhile, the public is hereby informed that President Adama Barrow will spend the weekend in his hometown, Mankamangkunda, on a private visit. Due to the COVID-19 and the state of public emergency, the local authorities and supporters are excused from any welcoming arrangements. Furthermore, no group or individual appointments will be scheduled during this period. The understanding and cooperation of the public is highly solicited. In another development, President Barrow acknowledged receipt of a message of best wishes from His Majesty King Mohammed VI, King of Morocco, which reads, "With best wishes for good health and well-being, may the holy month of Ramadan bring hope and foster greater solidarity amongst Muslims and throughout the world." The release ends. The Department of Water Resources recently made a prediction on June 2nd that there might be more cases of malaria to be recorded during this year's rainy season. Our reporter Jacqueline Colley interviewed the Regional Directorate Public Health Officer of Region 1 on ways to maintain and prevent malaria, and she now reports.
The Gambia has one short rainy season from June to October, and most of the malaria transmission occurs between August and December. Mr. Kamara noted that as a health ministry, they are overwhelmed with the presence of COVID-19, but notwithstanding, they are not losing sight of other intervention areas like malaria.
As a health ministry, we are overwhelmed with COVID-19 as we speak, but notwithstanding, we are not also losing sight of the other intervention areas. Already with regards to malaria, a lot of interventions have already been registered, and then there has been a decline, tremendous decline in the cases that are recorded. But notwithstanding, we are not also relenting with the predictions that we may see more malaria cases. So various factors are responsible, ranging from the topography, ranging from the climate change, and people's way of living, especially in densely populated areas. All those are factors that aggravate or will ensure or lead to more mosquito breeding in the areas due to the high population density.
Kamara said the most significant part of preventing the spread of malaria is sensitization and engaging key stakeholders, because the ministry or regional directorate cannot do it alone. So therefore, they need collaborations and partnerships to share a lot of activities when implementing solutions to cases related to health. And the greatest stakeholders to them is the communities, because they are the ones that are affected more. On ways of improving sanity and scaling up of malaria control intervention, Kamara highlighted that the increase of availability and access to long-lasting insecticide nets, which is very vital to pregnant women and children below the age of 5, because they are the most vulnerable towards the malaria disease. Integrated vector control intervention, environmental sanitation, including sensitization, among others, are key measures to prevent malaria, and commended the community of Sukuta for their efforts of cleaning their neighborhoods, which calls for sanity.
There is also environmental sanitation, including sensitization. People will recall that during the former regime, this is not political anyway, but it was a good move that environmental sanitation they call SETSETAL was ongoing. And then, but today, people are somehow relent. But I have to applaud the people of Sukuta. Sukuta is one of the communities in the Kombo area here. It's evidence-based. If you want, you can make a site visit and you will attest to it. Every morning or every alternate day, you'll see a group of women, cleaning the streets, cleaning their compound, cleaning their yards. These are very important practices. It's not politically related. But if you want to say that this is politics, so I will not adhere to it. At the end of the day, the disease, when it strikes, it doesn't know which political affiliation you have. No disease knows that. COVID-19 is one of them.
Furthermore, he noted that the people in the rural areas tend to use the insecticide nets for fencing their farmlands and protecting their farm produce from farm animals, which is totally unacceptable because the nets are meant to prevent oneself from transmitting the disease. So therefore, he noted that sensitization on these matters will be done thoroughly. He advised the public to always seek for medical attention when the signs and symptoms are noticed, which are high fever, vomiting, muscles pain, high temperature, and sometimes diarrhea. Jacqueline Coley, reporting for Star TV News.
The Gambia Federation of the Disabled Association were presented with sanitary materials at their main office in Kanifing. The presentation is part of the Ministry of Health's efforts in mitigating the spread of COVID-19 and to protect the differently disabled persons, while Mudu Albaji reports.
The donated items will be further distributed to the members of the differently disabled persons in the provinces in order for them to be part of the fight against the COVID-19. The items include 200 sanitizers and 1,000 face masks. The Director of Health Promotion and Education at the Ministry of Health, Modun Njai, assured the Disabled Federation for his ministry's support. Njai also called on the differently disabled people to engage in sensitizing the people about the dangers of COVID-19 and its preventive measures.
As a result of that, the committee thought it necessary to work very closely with the Gambia Federation of the Disabled. We have the president here, Mr. Mane is here, who has been the one who initiated our relationship. And we want to assure you that the Emergency Committee is in full support of the partnership, and we are going to work with you from here. Mr. Mane is going to work with our team, people who are already inland. And along the way, they will also be carrying out some sensitization activities. Because we want also them to be involved in the sensitization, so that from here, whatever message they have, they can also use that to sensitize their families and their immediate contacts, so that they can also be able to prevent themselves from the transmission of COVID-19.
Director Njai thanked Mr. Mane for coming up with the idea of building a partnership between the Health Ministry and the Federation of the Differently Challenged People. Upon receiving the items, Ibrahima Mane expresses delight to the Ministry of Health, noting that such gestures are what he expected from the government. He further calls on the ministers to emulate the Minister of Health due to the magnanimous effort he played in helping the physically challenged people.
And he's also an advocate for all the disabled people in this country. Over 300,000 of you are here, going to Mr. Bau. Mr. Mane has been your advocate. And we want to assure you that the ministry will continue to partner with the Gambia Federation of the Disabled to give them the necessary support, to provide them with the necessary information that they can use to protect themselves from COVID-19. We are here today, and then all the messages that are going to be sent here today are delivered to you people, those are the physically challenged people, will be delivered to you through Mr. Mane. Today we are also handing over 200 sanitizers, 1,000 face masks, and 2,000 hand gloves for the people supported by the Gambia Federation for the Disabled.
On behalf of the Federation, Mr. Mane thanked the Ministry of Health for giving them a helping hand in fighting against the pandemic. Reporting for Star TV, I am Modu Elbaji.
And we now look at the news beyond our borders. Sudanese authorities have put up barricades outside the military headquarters to stop protesters from gathering there. Crowds are expected to mark a year since a violent crackdown by security forces in which more than 100 people were killed and 700 others wounded. The uprising saw President Omar al-Bashir removed from power, but many victims say those who replace him are yet to deliver justice. Al Jazeera's Heba Morgan reports from Khartoum.
It's been a year since his son Abbas was killed. Yet Farah and his family can't bring themselves to open his closet to clean out his belongings. He was killed in a deadly raid by Sudanese military on a pro-democracy sit-in at the army headquarters in Sudan's capital, Khartoum. And now the few belongings he leaves behind are what the family cherishes most.
We found out he was shot in the attack when someone saw the video on social media and called us. He had left the house when he heard about the attack. Then he went to the hospital to look for him. We didn't know he was dead until we started searching in the hospital. Then we had to begin the long process of filing cases at the police station to receive permits to bury the body.
This video was taken moments after 27-year-old Abbas was shot. The June 3rd attack brought an end to the sit-in that started in early April. It was what prompted the military to overthrow the country's longtime president Omar al-Bashir after months of protests. After he was ousted, the sit-in continued as protesters demanded the military hand over power to civilian rule. Witnesses say the attack, which was led by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces on the unarmed protesters, was a total onslaught. At least 120 protesters were killed on the day of the attack on the sit-in, but they were not the only atrocities recorded. Rights groups reported women and men were raped and sodomized, and witnesses reported bodies being thrown into the Nile River, and many who were present on the day of the attack remain missing. But a year after the attack, some have criticized the committee and say the investigations are slow and justice is being delayed.
When we took to the streets in December 2018, we demanded freedom, peace and justice. Sudan can't go forward without peace and freedom, but more importantly, it can't go forward without justice.
Back in the room that was once Abbas's, his sister says the government needs to remember the price paid by many to bring it to power.
The government came to power through blood. People sacrificed their lives and now there's no justice that has been delivered. The people on the streets haven't forgotten what it took and won't move on without that justice and accountability.
Accountability that 1 year on since the attack remains elusive for families who've lost their loved ones. Hiba Morgan, Al Jazeera, Khartoum.
Roxy Washington says Floyd was a good man and father. The mother of George Floyd's daughter held an emotional news conference as the state of Minnesota began an investigation into racism within the Minneapolis Police Department. There has been another night of protests and anger in cities across the United States as crowds defied curfews to march against racism and police brutality. Well, Al Jazeera's John Hendren reports from Minneapolis in the U.S. states of Minnesota.
A week after George Floyd's death lit the spark that left American cities in flames, Roxy Washington is demanding justice.
Shiana does not have a father. He would never see her grow up, graduate. He would never walk her down the aisle.
Echoing the crowd of protesters at the site of George Floyd's death, Floyd's family wants all 4 officers involved in his detention to be charged with a crime.
I'm here for my baby. And I'm here for George because I want justice for him. I want justice for him because he was good. No matter what anybody thinks, he was good. And this is the proof that he was a good man. I am tired.
At the state capitol in St. Paul, where thousands of protesters met to keep the pressure on their government, Minnesota's governor says he wants justice too, and he's launched a discrimination probe into the Minneapolis Police Department to get it.
The investigation will review MPD's policies, procedures, and practices over the last 10 years to determine if the department has utilized systemic discriminatory practices towards people of color.
The governor says he wants the protesters to know they're heard. What we keep hearing from protesters in the street is that they don't trust the police. They want the police to stop discriminating against African Americans. And even black professionals tell us what happened to George Floyd here could have happened to any one of them.
A need for change for systematic justice here in America.
Maurice and Arlicia say they experience discrimination on a daily basis, but they worry most about their children encountering police.
I worry a lot. They're young adults. They're trying to stay and positive and be productive in their everyday lives, be noble, law-abiding citizens. But unfortunately, when you can't change your complexion or your ethnicity, you don't always get that opportunity.
It's a theme heard over and over at the site known as the George Floyd Memorial. They come not just for George Floyd, but for those who might come next. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, Minneapolis.
China withheld vital information about the outbreak and waited more than a week before publishing the genome of the novel coronavirus in January. That is according to an investigation by the Associated Press news agency, which found that the World Health Organization official heaped praise on Beijing to coax more information. Al Jazeera's Catherine Yu reports from Beijing, China.
When news of the virus emerged in January, the World Health Organization lauded Beijing's response.
We were very impressed with the level of engagement of the Chinese government at all levels.
But while the UN agency praised China in public, privately, officials were reportedly frustrated by a lack of transparency. An investigation by the Associated Press concluded that Chinese health officials not only withheld information about the outbreak, they also delayed distributing the COVID-19 genome by several days. Chinese health officials told the public that the possibility of human-to-human transmission was low. The WHO tweeted in agreement. But behind the scenes, agency staff were apparently skeptical. Portraying China positively, as WHO Director Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus did during a meeting with Xi Jinping in late January, was said to be used as a strategy to gain more information. China's foreign ministry says the Associated Press report is untrue.
Since the epidemic broke out, China has been acting in an open, transparent and responsible manner. We have stayed in close and sound communication and cooperation with the WHO.
Since the beginning of the outbreak, China's foreign ministry has denied any cover-up or inaccuracy when it comes to informing the public about the coronavirus. These new allegations deal an added blow to both Beijing and the World Health Organization at a time when the agency is struggling to maintain support.
Chinese officials.
Last week, Donald Trump said the U.S. was terminating its relationship with the WHO, accusing it of being China-centric. Chinese President Xi Jinping has meanwhile pledged $2 billion to the organization over the next 2 years, funding which analysts say could increase China's influence over the agency.
China's going to have more influence than ever inside the WHO, but for officials within the UN, this is a really difficult balancing act. They have to make sure that they keep China happy while at the same time not alienating other donors to the point that even more money gets pulled.
China has agreed to a WHO-led review into the origin of the pandemic once the outbreak is under control, an investigation which many will be scrutinizing when and if it does happen. Katrina Yu, Al Jazeera, Beijing.
And before we end the news, a recap of our main headlines. Impact of COVID-19 on lives and livelihood extremely destructive, says President Barrow. President Barrow appoints 2 justices of the Supreme Court of the Gambia. Health Ministry not losing sign of the deadly malaria disease in this upcoming rainy season. 1 year since crackdown, government yet to deliver justice in Sudan. Through tears, mother of George Floyd's daughter demand justice. China withheld COVID-19 information according to AP investigation. Well, that's all for this edition of today's news. Please do enjoy the rest of our program and join us tomorrow for more news. Thanks for watching.